Much like humanity can't seem to get enough of the Moomins, I also can't seem to stop talking about them because here I am making another video. If you don't know what the Moomins are, I have already talked about it in more detail during my last video, but here's the basics anyway. This is a Moomin. These are more Moomins. This is where they live. These are their friends. These are their books, as well as comics and the dozens of adaptations that they got along the years. The Moomins are great and I love them. Alright? Alright. Now, join me as we continue to explore the 2019 Moomins adaptation, because, once again, I want to talk about Moominvalley. Last time, we discussed Moomintroll's character arcs and how far he's come in terms of taking control of his own living narrative, slowly learning to stand up for himself and choosing his own path.
Yeah, and he grows up as his end of Moomintroll's first season arc, really.
Yeah.
He deals with something fully alone. And
the first season highlighted his wish to step out of his dad's shadow and become his own person, as hard as it may be to leave one's comfort zone. He still has a long way to go, but he's already made some progress, and he appears to be on the right path. However, another important aspect of Moomintroll's character is his relationship with his best friend Snufkin, who in turn resides in Moominvalley for most of the year, but leaves every winter, only returning with spring. Snufkin is the person Moomintroll cares the most for, the one he always wishes to have by his side. However, Snufkin also happens to be a free spirit. Free spirit, baby! He hates being caged up, be it literally or figuratively. Throughout the series, it is possible to see how the kind of love Moomintroll feels for Snufkin can be a little suffocating, simply because it is so intense. Moomintroll always waiting and longing. Moomintroll who sat at home, who waited for him and admired him, who always told him, of course you have to feel free. Naturally, you must go away. I do understand that you have to be alone at times. And all the times, his eyes were black with disappointment and no one could help it. And if you think this is an exaggeration, I'll have you know, this is a literal quote from one of the books. As much as Moomintroll respects Snufkin's freedom, he can't stop himself from yearning for his friend's return, or from being absolutely ecstatic when he does come back during the spring. The only problem is that Snufkin himself can't cope with this sort of adoration, and so Moomintroll will never have his affection be returned with the same kind of devotion, and will therefore always have a longing in his heart that he cannot cure. And so, as we have seen, the lesson Moomintroll must learn is to love with an open hand, giving both Snufkin and himself the freedom they deserve. I didn't talk much about the books in my previous video, but here's the thing. They pull no punches when it comes to making you feel things. Sure, they're supposedly meant for kids, but they're not afraid of discussing deeper themes of love and purpose in living. They will talk about the concept of yearning 500 times, and you will feel it stab in your heart each and every one of those times. What I mean by that is, yearning is kind of a big deal in the books. Which is why I'm not surprised to see it pop up in the Moominvalley adaptation too. When the creators said this would be a seasonal show, it felt nothing but fair. After all, Moomintroll's life is very much ruled by a cycle of seasons, and those seasons, on the other hand, are defined by whether Snufkin stays or goes. Spring is when he comes, and those days involve a lot of waiting for it to happen and a lot of joy when he arrives. Summer is when they get to spend most of their time together, without the threat of distance. Autumn is stained by the phantom of Snufkin's upcoming departure, and winter is characterized by missing him. This is, of course, speaking from a Moomintroll-centric perspective, which is the route that the books tend to follow as well. It's not often that we get to focus on Snufkin's side of things. The 90s adaptation, which until recently was probably the most well-known one, also follows this pattern, something that didn't go unnoticed by the Moominvalley crew.
So my Snufkin is slightly different from the series in the 90s, but not because we chose to do a different character, because what I realized watching the series that was made in the 90s was that Snufkin barely speaks. He has very, very few lines, and which is kind of what allows him to remain as this mysterious, mythical character. But in our series, he has a lot of lines and a few episodes that are dedicated to Snufkin. He's almost like the only one in the episode, so...
More Snufkin screen time, on the other hand, allows us to have a better understanding of the character's perspective. So, what does that bring us? A lot of Season 1 was spent focusing on Moomintroll's process of becoming his own person. Snufkin, however, didn't have to go through that journey. He was already sure of who he was when the series began. His trips away from and back to Moominvalley are entirely his choice. He understands his own limits and can easily step away from situations that make him feel uncomfortable. He has a very strong set of morals that he follows at any opportunity, and he won't change his ways just because they don't match what other people want from him.
I made those footprints.
Huh?
From these big old shoes I found.
What? Why?
To see what life is like in someone else's shoes.
And what's it like?
Uncomfortable.
He literally doesn't want any other kind of life. He is happy with being who he is. This kind of certainty and self-assurance might be part of why Moomintroll admires him so deeply. Snufkin is the kind of confident, level-headed individual that he wishes he could be. Moomintroll's almost blind trust in Snufkin's ideas and opinions is also very easy to see. Snufkin himself doesn't seem to mind this arrangement. He often appears to be just as happy to offer Moomintroll advice as his friend is to take it. In the Golden Tail episode, for example, you can see how happy Snufkin is to watch his friend enjoying himself, and how he becomes visibly closed off the more that Moomintroll is forced to play a role that doesn't match him. When Moomintroll laments over how he is not like his father, Snufkin remarks that he always did like a happy ending. To him, being in control of one's own destiny is the most important thing there is, and he is glad that Moomintroll is starting to realize it. So it's all cool, right? Snufkin's perfect. Roll the credits and the video. Well, not exactly. As much as Snufkin is happy with himself, his own standoffishness stops him from seeing when he is being rude to others, or isolating himself so much that he's actually pushing away those that care about him. This sort of behavior becomes almost selfish, like he doesn't mind hurting other people to get what he wants, emotionally or physically. Let's take the second episode, the Spring Tune. It's the beginning of spring, and the viewer gets to follow both Snufkin's journey back to Moominvalley and Moomintroll's ritual of waiting for his friend. Except, right from the beginning, it's possible to see the disconnect between the two. While Moomintroll wants nothing more than for his friend to come home, Snufkin spends the whole day agonizing over how he's not done being alone and doesn't want to get back. The one thing he wants to do before returning is to finish creating his new spring tune, a song he will play in his harmonica on his way back, which also serves as a means of announcing his reappearance. Except this process is constantly interrupted by the presence of a small creature that keeps following him, making him really uncomfortable. This creature presents himself as a nameless admirer, one that has heard countless stories of Snufkin and treats him as a sort of celebrity. Snufkin, on the other hand, hates pretty much everything about this. He rejects the creature's advances, even though he does grant it the favor of finding it a name, calling it Titi-Woo. Just as soon as he does that, though, Snufkin suffers from a change of heart and realizes that he was probably ruder than he should have been, so he sets off to find the creature once more. This leads into a frantic running sequence through the woods, taking Snufkin all the way back to Moominvalley, where he discovers that Moomintroll is now best friends with Titi-Woo instead of him. But fortunately, it was all a dream. Back in real life, he makes amends with Titi-Woo and realizes that he actually wants to go back to Moominvalley now, finally composing his new spring tune. Here, Snufkin's loner tendencies keep him from giving Titi-Woo the sort of attention that it wishes for. You could make a case that the creature was the one in the wrong for not respecting Snufkin's boundaries, but Snufkin himself seems to understand that it was a bit of an overreaction. The 7th episode, Snufkin and the Parkkeeper, also brings us a story about how Snufkin takes his own values too far and must struggle to fix the damage that he has caused. While walking through the woods, Snufkin comes across an area that has been closed off as a private park and immediately develops a grudge against the Parkkeeper. With the help of Little Mai and some Hetty Fattener seeds, he is able to kick the guy out. Yeah, that's right, Snufkin, liberate the land. Although, now he's become responsible for the woody kids that were being kept in the park, who all imprint on him. To make matters worse, Moomintroll and Snufkin are blamed for the operation and are thrown in jail. Here, Snufkin realizes that no matter how much he values freedom, he was directly responsible for his friends losing theirs, and it is only fair of him to confess and stay in their place. Aside from that, he also comes to terms with how he really is responsible for the kids he liberated, taking care of them until they find a new place to live in. Slowly, Snufkin seems to be understanding how just because he likes to be on his own doesn't mean that he is free from dealing with the consequences of his actions. He must be more mindful not only of how he treats others, but also of how he solves his own problems and how these solutions affect those around him. And then there's how both episodes we just discussed have one thing in common. Snufkin's plotlines happen thanks to his resistance against being around others. The reason why he ran into the park and its owner was because, as he puts it, he was starting to feel enclosed. The scene in which Snufkin leaves the party early is one of my favorites in animation history because really, who has never done that? Snufkin does seem to realize the error of his ways later on, coming to the conclusion that it was kind of a jerk move to leave Moomintroll behind, but that doesn't change the fact that being around people was too much for him. During the Spring Tune episode, on the other hand, Snufkin seems to be mad about everything Titi-Woo does, but what really pushes his buttons is when the creature starts to talk about Moominvalley and how eagerly Moomintroll awaits his return. Here, Snufkin feels absolutely attacked and responds with defensive comments as if he's being accused of doing something terrible, as if he was in the wrong for not wanting to go back. And then, we get the dream sequence. In this dream, Snufkin sets off running through the woods, under the pretense that he has to go back. At first, the viewer might think it's to find Titi-Woo, but then it becomes clear that he's actually rushing back to Moominvalley. However, the forest itself seems to turn against him, with the trees and animals attacking him from every angle. When he finally reaches the valley, a voice warns him that he has taken too long, and that everyone has forgotten about him.
It's no use. No one will remember you here. You've been gone too long, Snufkin.
Still, he attempts to prove the warning wrong and rushes to Moomintroll, only to discover that he has been traded for Titi-Woo. Snufkin withheld his affection for so long that when he decided to open himself up, it was too late. And that is his greatest fear. Another point I'd like to mention is how, during Snufkin's chase, he ends up losing his harmonica as the forest attacks him. He has a moment of hesitation, considering chasing after it, but he decides to keep rushing back to the valley. This instrument, as well as the tune that it plays, is a representation of why he's taking so long to return. In the dream, he has to let it go in order to come back home, as if returning to the valley, so eager to be loved, means losing a part of his identity, the part that thrives on being alone. And still in the dream, he lets himself lose that side of him in order to continue. Even though by the end, it seems to have been for nothing, because he had already been forgotten. There is another episode that deals with people being forgotten. It's the 11th episode, The Invisible Child. Tiki attempts to rescue Nini, a girl who has been so neglected that she faded away. The whole Moomin family gets involved in the process, trying more and more outlandish ways of making her visible again, but the solution turns out to be simply listening to the girl. As everyone rejoices over Nini's newfound visibility, Tiki pulls Moomintroll aside and tells him to keep on listening, for there are many other lost souls out there who need to be heard. As the camera pans to Snufkin. The song that accompanies this scene is called Ready Now, and the lyrics talk about the healing power of being listened to and being treated with kindness. As we have already seen, the music in the show is used to its advantage. In the Spring Tune episode, for example, the very soundtrack warns us that Snufkin's chase is actually a dream sequence. So pairing this song with those events was not a coincidence, just like putting a song about the power of being heard over footage of Snufkin leaving the valley. And of course, the one who always listens to Snufkin is none other than Moomintroll. Moomintroll, so eagerly waiting, so glad to see his friend. If it was up to him, Snufkin would never become a lost soul like the ones Tiki was talking about. However, It doesn't depend entirely on him. There's no point in listening if no one's there to be listened to. It is Snufkin who needs to let himself be heard. He knows that he already has someone who listens. He just can't shake off the fear that they too will forget about him. And this fear will never go away while Snufkin doesn't let himself be loved. It is almost impossible not to draw a parallel between Snufkin's dream sequence and the plot of the very next episode, The Last Dragon in the World. In those cases, Moomintroll and Snufkin each have a creature that they wish to become closer to, only for this very creature to trade them for the true object of their affection. Moomintroll tries to keep the dragon too close, and is therefore abandoned by it. The dragon only has eyes for Snufkin, for only he understands true freedom. On the other hand, Snufkin pushes Tidiwoo away at first, but then tries to gain back its trust. Except the creature has traded him for Moomintroll, the one who has just as much love to share. Moomintroll loses the dragon because he loved it too much, while Snufkin loses Tidiwoo because he loved it too little. Both characters have a lesson to learn when it comes to love, and dealing with these issues will not only let them grow as people, but also become closer. And if there's one thing for certain is that neither is ready to let the other go. Because really, they don't have to. Thank you for watching. Well, hello there. It was very nice of you to watch this video. If you have enjoyed the video, you can do those cool things such as clicking the like button and also subscribing to the channel, clicking the notification bell too. Please feel free to leave a comment down below, especially if it is about how much you love Snufkin. You can also follow me on Twitter and share this video with all of your friends. Thank you so much for stopping by, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye! The guy who voices Moomin Papa also voices the Butt Witch from 12 Forever. My channel has come full circle.